So, today we're going to dive into something pretty incredible. We're looking at an ancient prophecy from the book of Zechariah and how it seems to perfectly map out the military campaign of one of the most famous people in history, Alexander the Great. It's a fascinating story. Okay, let's get right into it. On one hand, you've got this prophecy written way back around 520 BC, and on the other, almost 200 years later, you have Alexander the Great's campaign in 332 BC. And here's the wild part. The claim is that Zechariah basically laid out Alexander's exact path down the coast. Let's see how it holds up. And you really got to let this sink in to see why this is so mind-blowing. We're talking about a gap of almost 2 centuries. This isn't someone predicting something a few days out. This is a detailed, geographical forecast written long before Alexander the Great was even a thought. This timeline is, well, it's everything. It really sets the stage. All right, so the prophecy kicks off in Zechariah chapter 9, and it reads almost like a military itinerary. It's called a burden, which is like a prophecy of judgment, and it follows this very specific route, starting up north in Syria and just marching its way south along the Phoenician coast. Here we go, verse 1. This is our starting point. The path of judgment begins in a place called the land of Hadrach, and it's set to land squarely on Damascus, which, was a huge, wealthy capital city in Syria. So the prophecy is literally putting the first pin on the map. And guess what? History lines up perfectly. In 333 BC, right after his huge victory at the Battle of Issus, Alexander did this exact thing. He didn't even go himself. He sent his top general, Parmenion, and Damascus, a key Persian stronghold, just gave up, surrendered, without a fight. And an unbelievable amount of Persian treasure fell right into Alexander's lap, which basically funded the rest of his campaign. Step 1 of the prophecy? Check. Okay, on to verse 2. The prophecy keeps moving south. It names another Syrian city, Hamath, and then it turns its attention to the 2 absolute powerhouses of Phoenicia, Tyre and Sidon. These weren't just any cities. They were famous for their wealth, their cleverness, and especially their naval power. And once again, Alexander's army seems to be following the script. Hamath, taken without much of a fuss. Then, as he gets to the coast, the city of Sidon just throws open its gates. Turns out, they were sick of being under Persian rule and pretty much saw Alexander as a liberator. So far, the prophesied path and the historical march are a perfect match. But the next city on the list? That was a whole different story. And now we get to the main event, really. The biggest challenge of Alexander's entire campaign and the absolute centerpiece of this prophecy, the city of Tyre. For centuries, Tyre was the crown jewel of Phoenicia, this maritime fortress that everyone thought was completely untouchable. Verse 3 just captures the essence of Tyre perfectly. It talks about its incredible defenses, a stronghold, and its ridiculous wealth. I mean, heaped up silver as the dust? This wasn't just another city. It was a commercial empire that had laughed off sieges from superpowers like Babylon before. So what exactly was this stronghold? Well, Tyre wasn't on the mainland. It was an island, a full half-mile out in the sea, surrounded by walls that were up to 150 feet high. That's insane. To even try to attack it, you needed more than an army. You needed a navy that could beat Tyre's own legendary fleet. For all practical purposes, it was unconquerable. But look at this. Verse 4 doesn't just say Tyre will fall. It gets super specific about how. First, its power in the sea, its navy, is going to be broken, smashed. And second, the city itself will be devoured with fire. That is an incredibly precise, 2-part prediction against what seemed like an impossible target. So the big question is, how did Alexander the Great, a general known for his land army, pull off what the mighty Babylonians couldn't? Well, the historical story of the Siege of Tyre is one of the most brilliant and just audacious feats of military engineering you'll ever read about. This is where Alexander's genius just takes over. His plan was simple but crazy. If he couldn't sail to the island, he'd just bring the land to the island. He literally built a causeway, a giant land bridge, half a mile out into the sea. When Tyre's navy kept attacking his workers, what did he do? He put together his own fleet using ships from cities he'd already conquered, like Sidon. Then he defeated Tyre's navy, which fulfills the first part of the prophecy. With their sea power gone, he finished the causeway, rolled his siege towers right up to their walls, and after 7 long, brutal months, his army stormed the city. And the end, it was brutal. About 8,000 people were killed in the attack. 30,000 survivors were sold into slavery. And just as Zechariah 9:4 predicted almost 200 years earlier, the great island fortress of Tyre, the city that built its stronghold in the sea, was completely devoured with fire. I mean, when you lay it all out like this, side by side, the connection is it's stunning. From Damascus just giving up, to Sidon submitting peacefully, all the way to the very, very specific two-part destruction of Tyre, first its navy, then the city itself by fire. Alexander's campaign follows the blueprint in Zechariah 9 to a T. So you're left with this massive question. You've got a text, this map of a future conquest, written down around 520 BC. And then, nearly 200 years later, a historical figure comes along and follows that map down to the last detail. What does that incredible alignment actually suggest? Now that is something worth thinking about.